Okay. Well, Labor Day is coming up.
Yes.
And so the first obvious question comes up, which is your relationship with the unions. How is that going right now?
It's an interesting question. Obviously, we've heard reports that the government has been disinvited from Labor Day events. I have yet to have an official word of that. But I believe that the unions as a collective have taken a stance that as a result of the government having taken proceedings against the unions to ensure that they follow proper procedure before taking industrial action, the unions appear to have taken a stance of they're not willing to be in a participatory mode with the government. And that's disappointing. As I had said last week, I think in a press conference, that the Ministry of Home Affairs has what we call the Labor Advisory Council, and we typically meet on a quarterly basis. But the unions have refused to participate, which is disappointing, because I take the view that notwithstanding the fact you may have disagreements in a certain area, it shouldn't prevent at least ongoing dialogue between the ministry that's responsible for labor and the unions. So obviously we support the union movement, we support the labor movement, and in as much as we are not being asked to participate, then that's for the unions to make that decision. I think I would hope that if the union decides that that is the stance that they desire to take, that, and from what I understand it is, but it is applicable to both political parties rather than just government being excluded, because that would just simply be a flag that it's not an impartial event, which would be unfortunate. Yeah.
Now, otherwise, how would you view your relationships with the unions? Do you think there has been adequate communication?
I feel that the ministry has done a very good job in the last number of years of having open and good dialogue with the unions, notwithstanding, of course, what's happened in the last number of months. But the position that I have always taken is that there is a labor law and there are collective bargaining agreements in place. And members and unions should follow the law and should follow the collective bargaining agreements before taking industrial action. And I don't think that anyone can really dispute that position. And this is why you have acts in place. If unions believe that they have a grievance, there's a proper procedure to follow in relation to that grievance. And that should be the course that should be taken.
Now, next off issue, of course, is job creation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously before the election, the government set up the line of 2,000 jobs.
Yes.
Is government going to reach that?
I'm confident that the answer is yes. I believe that with the projects that look like they're going to be coming online with St. George's, Morgan's Point, all of the opportunities that arise from America's Cup and the related industries attached to all of these projects, Pink Beach, Aerial Sands, that you will see that uptick.
Now, do you think the government's been putting all of its eggs in the America's Cup basket?
I don't at all. No. Obviously, when the pledge was made, America's Cup was not on the cards. And America's Cup came sometime into this administration. So not at all. Desarellis obviously has been the chosen developer for St. George's. That would have continued. Morgan's Point, these types of projects would have continued, in my view, whether we had America's Cup or not. Obviously, that's given extra confidence to the developers, I think, of these various resorts. But no, I don't think so. Obviously, the America's Cup is a major boost for Bermuda as a whole. Is it favorable for employment? Absolutely. And I think the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, which falls under this ministry, has done a superb job in getting the news out there as to what small businesses can gain from things like the America's Cup. Is it great? Fantastic. But are we putting our eggs in the basket? No.
The OBA has come under fire due to a lack of consultation. At least the perception of it, where the people are complaining that the OBA, rather than having an actual dialogue, sort of tells people what's going on.
No, I think that's the opposition view. And that's the view that they like to put out there and perpetrate, and I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think where the opposition gets it wrong, the opposition seems to take the view that if you don't listen to us as the opposition, then you haven't consulted. Just rubbish that claim entirely. I think this government has been shown to be far more open and transparent in the things that we do. We have passed Patty, despite decided sitting on the books with the opposition for tenure, which was then government for 10 years. So I rubbished that.
Speaking of things that we've heard a lot from the Progressive Labour Party, collaborative immigration reform.
I do laugh because I don't understand how you can have a collaborative immigration reform effort when there are definitive red lines that are put in advance of any discussions or any thought at all. So until their views change in respect of what is actually prepared to be discussed, I have no interest in having that collaborative approach with the opposition at all. They appear to be at odds in their views of immigration reform generally. This government has very definitive views about where we think we need to go, and we will go down that road consulting with the public as we go. But to suggest that the opposition has all the answers when they've effectively left us in a big mess through their lack of real reform, I'm not interested in taking that approach at this time.
Do you think you would get less flack if you were a member of parliament versus a senator?
No, you're going to get the same amount in immigration. It's a touchy subject. Some have called it the third rail of politics that most people don't want to address. I find it interesting when opposition supporters make a lot of noise about it, but their memories are very short. I think the opposition suffers from a memory deficit in respect of their history, where a Minister of Immigration sat in the Senate for many years. So I don't buy that at all. People here forget that there's a constitution that requires at least one minister to sit in cabinet from the Senate and no more than two. And this government has one, and that is myself from the Senate. And that's the decision of the Premier.
And the last thing, of course, is the municipalities. Obviously, your relationship with the Corporation of Hamilton has had a couple twists over the last few years.
Yes, just a few.
What are your thoughts, first of all, on your relationship with the previous administration?
Yeah, it was challenging. I think there were a number of people out there that said, Minister, you'd be better off just closing the corporation down entirely and turning the corporation into a government board. And I've said this repeatedly, that was never our interest to do that. The city of Hamilton and St. George's both have rich history, some good and some bad, but you don't simply shut something down because of a perceived conflict of personality. And you're not all expected to get along. Having said that, the working relationship is very good. The Municipalities Act's obviously been amended, so there is some more government oversight. But our position is very much one of, we're hands-off in as much as we can be. There are obviously financial instructions that need to be followed. The minister has to get engaged from time to time. But remember, the Act appeals to, it's actually in place for both St. George's and Hamilton. But they pretty much get on with the business that they need to get on with without interference from us. I will say that I'm pleased, obviously very pleased indeed with the result from the Supreme Court recently, which goes to show that, again, mudslinging does not work, and the government has taken a very strong position in a number of these areas to try and get things right. Some things will be unpopular, but we're not necessarily here to be popular. We're here to get a job done. And I think things that happen with the corporation in other areas bear that out. But I think most people see that we're trying to do the best thing for Bermudians, despite the noise. Faith has to be placed in the hands of those that are the decision makers. It's not for us. I mean, it's an interesting position. People say, well, Minister, don't interfere. So you leave people in a device and say, well, Minister, you should have interfered. The very same people will flip over the very next day. They did due diligence. Some things clearly went awry, which we discovered, and we put in the appropriate stops to that. No, I don't regret it. I think that the corporation had elected officials. They made those choices, and they made some poor choices. Some interesting developments, I think, coming up in this ministry again in the next number of months. We continue to work on Parliamentary Election Act reform. We've had some very good work ongoing in the ministry through the summer, and we continue to work towards absentee balloting initiatives for students. So again, what I find always with politics is, yes, we made a number of promises that we will continue to fulfill, but that's over a 5-year period. Everyone has one thing they want to see done, and I remain keen to see the promise of absentee balloting fulfilled, and we'll get on, and we continue to work on that. I will fight with my colleagues to see what we can get in the throne speech, and hopefully my pieces will get in. But again, that's for the Premier and the Cabinet to make a collective decision, and under Premier Dunkley to make those decisions. So, again, we have continuing work in relation to status issues. We will be publishing sometime in September a number of rulings that were made by the Immigration Appeal Tribunals that have had an effect on the way in which different cases have to be handled going forward in the department. And a lot of these, again, people will be concerned, but we can assure the public that we continue to work what's in the best interest for all. So it's exciting times, and the amount of things that we've got to continue to do, they won't stop, despite I think, a lot of noise that when you actually scratch the surface are baseless and factless most of the time.